Welcome to another episode of Talking Statamic, the podcast where we talk with developers and agencies and people who use Statamic every day. I'm your host, Michael Leroy, and today I'm joined by Lokman Musliu, founder and CEO of Lucky Media. Hello, Lokman. Thanks for being here. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Michael, and thanks for inviting me to the show. It's really an honor to be a guest of this new podcast, I guess.
Yeah. It's fun. It's nice to get a chance to meet with, people like you that, are in the community, but maybe in a different part of the continent that haven't had the chance to meet in person before, and just sort of broaden the network a little bit. So glad to have you here. Why don't we start by, why don't you give us an introduction about who you are, how you got started in development, and just some background about you.
Okay, so I'm Lokman. Both me and my brother, we run Lucky Media, which is, we call it like a software shop. We mainly work with Laravel, Statamic, obviously. We do some front-end work with React, Next.js, Vue sometimes. Mm-hmm. And we work together with a team of 10 other developers and one designer. So we are pretty comfortable for now, I would say. And as I mentioned, our team is mostly, not mostly, but all is remote, and we kind of just we've been working together for a lot now. That's like a quick intro about me and what Lucky Media does.
And so you guys are mostly a dev shop. So do you have an in-house designer, or is that sort of a partnership?
Yeah, so we do have an in-house designer, but he just started. I think it's his first year now, and we are kind of like, we also do partnerships with other designers. One of them is actually very active in the Statamic community, Dave Smith from London. We've worked together with Dave Smith on our website redesign just recently, and he worked together with our designer to come up with our new branding and redesign and everything. Our in-house designer worked a bit more on the branding stuff, and Dave kind of jumped in on the website redesign. Like, he helped us a lot. So I would say it's a mix of, like, we do our own stuff, but then we also work with other designers, because I just feel like the best work is being done like when you kind of work with other people. You get the most out of it.
Right on. And you mentioned your brother's involved. Has this always been a family business?
Yeah, from the start. Yeah, so I started Lucky Media right after college, but it was mostly like a side gig while I was working other, like, real jobs, as I would call it back then. So it was more like a side hustle. And then, like, once I decided to go for it, basically we agreed both with my brother. He's also a developer, but he kind of leans a bit more into the project management stuff. So he kind of does both. Like, he works a lot, like, with the team on figuring out next tasks, finishing up projects. He also does some dev work here and there. He also does some financials sometimes. So kind of like the management side of things. I mostly experiment with new technologies, talk with clients. I code a lot. I help others sometimes when ChatGPT is down. Those awesome. Our roles are pretty separated, but also intertwined.
Well, that's good. It's nice to have people that can wear different hats and cover all the bases. Have you guys always been in the Laravel space, or did you start with other technologies?
Yeah, so I've been in the Laravel environment or space for a long time. When I was a student, it was Laravel 4.2, I think. And that was my first experience with Laravel. That's how I started. Like, I had this uni project where I had to submit it, and the closest thing that was going to help me at that time was Laravel. I think there was a tutorial at that time from the Laracast owner, but he was working for another website called Netcode Tuts, I think was the name. So that's how basically I followed the tutorial there, which was like an I think it was an authentication project with Laravel.
Yep.
And
So
that's
pre Laracast then.
oh yeah, it was pre Laracast, and
Okay.
it was that's how I kind of started. And then that's also like after that, like my brother got introduced to it during his studies in Sweden. I think he also kind of got into that world on himself, and then like we kind of we both like the same things, so why not just work together? But apart from that, I think we've mostly we've worked with Laravel from the start, but we've also dabbled in front end technologies a lot. For example, Next.js, we worked a lot with Next.js. Before Statamic, we used to work with other CMSs, obviously with WordPress. After I think after we jumped ship from WordPress, there was a period of time where we kind of explored the JavaScript ecosystem for CMSs, and we landed on Sanity CMS.
Yep.
We built our own website on top of Sanity, which was great at that time, and that was right after we discovered Statamic. So and then that was like kind of a pivotal moment for us where like a lot of devs who work with Statamic, they're like, oh, this is great, why
Yeah.
why did I miss this? And that was me back in 2020, and I think it was Statamic 3, the beta version. So the beta version of
Okay.
Statamic 3, I think it was beta 20, and I was just on Discord asking a bunch of questions
Yeah.
until I kind of figured it out. And I didn't, like, as most of other developers, I didn't have a lot of experience with Statamic 2. One being because I I think I've never looked into it because I knew it was closed source, so there wasn't a way for me to go and look at the code and see what
Right.
it does.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the reasons. And then after we discovered Statamic, like I think we kind of changed everything from there. And then our own website, we moved it to Statamic, and then like one by one, we started moving all the websites to Statamic, and we haven't looked back.
What was it about Statamic that grabbed you initially enough for you to like move everything, your own website included, onto Statamic and off of Sanity that you'd like just embraced?
So one of the reasons I picked up on Sanity was the schema-less promise, right? So you just write JavaScript objects of your schema, and then it just works. I don't know how they do it in the backend; like you don't have control of that. But Sanity was kind of a mix-up of a traditional CMS and a hosted solution. So they would host all your assets, your entries, and everything into their cloud, but you could control the control panel with code. So that was the initial, like, I would say, reason why I kind of liked Sanity, because I could dabble around with code, but also there is this hosted version which I don't manage. So that was fun, but it became a problem once we started to extend it, because there was a few gotchas. For example, you can't really extend the backend because it's their hosted backend, so you're kind of limited on their scope of stuff to do. And with Statamic, trust me, the first thing that kind of blew my mind was like, oh, this runs on flat files. So basically, the premise of not having to deal with databases was for me a huge deal. It also may be important to share that before Statamic, we kind of explored some other flat file CMSs, because I kind of I like the idea of not having to worry about a database, as most of our websites, they weren't that big enough for databases, and it was always something that was bothering me. Like, why do I need a database for this? So I think we saw Kirby, and there was one called Gravity CMS or Graph CMS. It was a flat file
Grav, I think.
CMS. Yeah, at that time. But then Statamic was like, okay. And then with Statamic, it was the beta version, which we liked a lot. And the reason that it was at that time, it became source aware, I think is the correct term. It was, I think that was the tipping point for us to start working with it.
You said that was around 2020, and already, I mean, it's only been, I guess it's 2025 already, so I guess it's going on 5 years now. But I mean, in that short time, you're already billing yourself as the #1 Statamic agency. How did that come about, and where does that come from?
Yeah. So right after, as I mentioned, right after we switched to Statamic, we kind of like. I think this happened naturally. I started getting involved a lot in the community. Like, just I was very curious to see what others are building and how they're building them. So naturally, I just started poking around and asking questions all the time. I know I've bothered Aaron a bunch of times, so I was just curious to see like what's going on and what's happening. So while we were offering Statamic to our clients, we kind of started like there were a lot of missing resources on Google for like Statamic tutorials because the
Hmm.
version 3 at that time was pretty new. So I think that's kind of how we started. We started writing some tutorials about Statamic, and we kind of started ranking on Google. So I know a few of our leads, like they reached out to us because of some of our articles that we wrote. uh, I
Hmm.
remember one of our clients reached out to us because he read an article we have regarding Statamic and how to optimize it for performance. So that was kind of the start, and then I think when the starter kits were introduced, I think we before the starter kits were introduced, I had a talk with Jack where I told him like, hey, I have this crazy idea of like doing themes for Statamic, and he stopped me and he was like, "Oh wait, because we are already doing this starter kits thing, and it's gonna be like themes but something else." And we were already working on our own starter kit, which you might already know. So that's how we built Lantamic, because it was supposed to be a theme that we were gonna build out other websites, right? A starter kit for us. So that's how,
Yeah.
how it kind of started. And I was gonna publish the whole repo and then just git clone for new project and modify it. But once Jack told me that, I just waited for for the starter kits to launch as a feature, and then it was really right after that. I think it was the first paid starter kit. Yeah, it was the first paid starter kit on the marketplace,
Wow. Okay.
and yeah, and I just immediately released it. I think the first paid one by an agency, I would say, like no one because I think Statamic had a few starter kits at the beginning. One of them was paid, and then a bunch of free ones. So ours was right after that. And the reason being was because we already had that up and running, and we just converted that to a starter kit and we just released it. So that after that, it kind of all went, I would say, upwards. We got a lot of from Lentamic. I think we got a lot of popularity among the community.
Hmm.
It became a very popular starter kit, and to this day, it still is. Uh, we got a lot of requests coming from people who like they wanted to extend Lentamic, but they didn't know how. So I think that's how we made the bulk of the connections that we have now. Like basically
Okay.
that was our like start, but like a really good start, I would say.
So it looks like you have up to 8 starter kits on the marketplace now. Did all of these arise sort of naturally, like Lantamic, or did they come out of client projects and you thought, hey, maybe this would make a good starter kit that we could release to the market?
So Lantamic was definitely out of our own. Like we had like something. We were thinking of doing something for us. Like when we were build at that time, we were building a lot of landing pages for small products. It was a
Hmm.
thing back then. So we were building a lot of landing pages for small products, and we were like, okay, we need something to whip this very quickly, but also allow clients easily, like they can make like new designs or like they can experiment with it. So
Yeah.
at that time, Tailwind UI came, like it was very popular. So it was kind of like this blog-based code where you grab a chunk of code, you paste it, and it just works.
Yeah.
I like that idea for Statamic, so that's how how we kind of started. But then for the other starter kits, the only one, the other two, like they're basically born the same way. So with Formatic, it was us doing like a forms project for a client, which was
Hmm.
very, very extensible. they could build out like multi-step forms, conditional fields, all those goodies. And at some point, I felt like this could be a starter kit because it removes just a lot of the work that you have to set up initially to make that work. So I remember I also consulted Jack about that too, and I think we had a small meeting. He saw it and he was blown away and he was like, "Oh, just release it as is. Like, don't add anything else." And that's how we released it. Like, honestly, I didn't expect anything from Formatic because it was just like a passion project of ours, but it's been doing really well. And then I think the e-commerce and the real estate starter kits. The e-commerce one was something I've always wanted to do because we have a bunch of clients on Simple Commerce,
Yep.
and I've always wanted to. And those were inherited projects, which is what I call projects that we haven't built from scratch, but
Right.
we've inherited them. So I've always had this idea that if we build e-commerce starter kit, it's gonna be something great, and I can structure it really nice, so it's very extensible. And that was based on a lot of client requests. So they were struggling with a lot of stuff, especially how they can structure a product and all those stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of keeping a balance between a page builder inside the product and also being like a product which you can sell. So with Simple Commerce, that's what it allowed us to do. And I kind of always felt that if we release this starter kit, it's going to be like a great example of how and then how to structure an e-commerce site. And then, as Duncan might recall, we started working on that, but because we have a lot of client work, we only could work on the starter kit for a short amount of time.
Right. Yeah.
So I think we started with Simple Commerce 4.
Okay.
And then once we released it, it was already Simple Commerce 7.
Oh, wow. Okay. So there's a bit of a delay.
There was a lot of delay because we kept pushing it. We had no time. And with all the starter kits, it's been like that. Like we worked on our spare time, so that was very limited. And sometimes I will just work on something during weekends when I was bored, but most of the time, like it was just during our spare time, which was crazy because it took a lot of time. But also on the first version, I think we went a bit too far. The first version of the e-commerce starter kit, it had a lot of custom functionality that we built for other clients that I thought might be nice on a starter kit. And when I asked Duncan, he was like, I don't think so. We had wish lists, we had guest accounts, we had accounts like where you could register and have your orders, account settings, and all of that. They weren't built as features. We just had them like as ideas.
Okay.
And I figured I'll consult Duncan before we start working on those. But yeah, I'm glad we didn't do them. Like we kept the starter kit very simple.
Yeah, I guess that kind of stuff could have been overkill if you'd included it all out of the box. Like probably most use cases don't need all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you basically lose the point of being a starter kit. It
Right.
becomes an opinionated kit.
Have you used that philosophy going forward with your other starter kits then, just like keeping it like pretty simple?
Yeah. So as we worked on other starter kits, which we kind of like at the moment, I don't think we are working on a starter kit right now. Like we just have this. I mean, usually the ideas that we get is from discussing it like with either the community or someone emails us, which happens a lot. They're giving us ideas like, hey, would it be great if Lantamic has this? Wouldn't it be great if I could do this? So one day I received this email. Someone asked me if if they can merge Lantamic with Formatic because they really like
Oh,
building
okay.
pages with that, but then they also like the form, so they need kind of both of those things. And I tried to see like what's the easiest for them to do that, and then we figured out that both of those projects they kind of matured on their own, so that it wasn't possible. And then we got just the idea like when we have some free time, we were going to reuse the code from Formatic to kind of add it as an add-on for Lantamic, just so it's an optional thing that you could install only if you wanted to. And that's basically how we work on these ideas. Like we get a lot of feedback from the community and the developers or clients who use Lantamic or any other starter kit. They reach out to us, and then as if we see that the idea is worth pursuing, we will put it on our to-do list. So when we have free time, we might go back to it and start.
Yeah, I was wondering if Formatic would become its own add-on.
I'm really hopeful because Jack is planning to add like a lot of to do an overhaul of the forms on Statamic 6, but I don't think it's going to be on launch, so probably after that. So I'm pretty excited because it will make Formatic very strong, and kind of like I can pitch it to clients who really want something more. For example, I don't know, submit it to a webhook, or custom workarounds like conditionals after submission and all that stuff. Right now you have to code it, which I mean it's okay for us because it's extra work. But I think it will become more powerful once those land in the core.
Yeah, and it already is. I mean, I was coding on a project a few months ago that required a lot of form work, and I thought, how am I going to do this? It's pretty complicated, multi-steps and all that stuff. And then I discovered Formatic, and I thought, this is going to get me like 90% of the way there, just with that. And then just a little bit of customization on top of that. So like I think that's a pretty great tool. Do you find there's a lot of adoption? Are people downloading this a lot?
Yeah, it's doing great. Also, people are like they're experimenting a lot with it. For example, I know an example. Someone made like a group field type, which also accepts other field types inside. So it was kind of like this nested thing, and I was like, this is never going to work because it requires a lot of work. And then they kind of found a way, like the bug was within the CMS. So they submitted a PR, which kind of made Formatic work with like super nested fields, like three levels deep, for example.
Oh, wow.
You could have a grid field type with other fields inside. So that was a mind-blowing moment for me. It was like, okay, so you could use it for that too. I didn't know.
Would you say this is your most popular starter kit? Or is Lantamic Pro probably the top of the list?
Yeah, actually both. Lantamic, like the regular one, and the Pro one, they're both like the most popular ones that we have in terms of downloads. And then right after those, I think it's Cloud, which is our second starter kit. And then it's Formatic, and I haven't seen the others, but yeah, those are the kind of the top three.
That's awesome. So, as a agency with a lot of client work, do you find that, these kinds of starter kits are a good investment for you? Like, you don't have to give numbers, but like, do they generate a good amount of revenue for you? So like, would you suggest people to build this as a revenue source, or is it still pretty small in terms of?
I would say it's pretty small. It's not something to rely on. Definitely, like it's not something like we can drop client work and focus on starter kits 100%. But I think it's a good side income, like just for things like that you do on your free time. I would call it a passive investment. It's like a passive income. So it's not. I would say it's in the middle. Like it's not bad.
So pivoting over to your client work, you guys are pretty well known for your Laravel stuff, and like you said, working with front end tools like Next. How would you say most of your clients discover you? Are they looking for Statamic, or are they looking for just a web app shop? Like what is it that people come to you for specifically?
So a lot of our Statamic clients, I would say, they found us through the Statamic Partners directory, or by Googling Statamic Agency, we come up first. So those are the two ways that they find us. Our existing clients, they were introduced to Statamic from us, so I don't call them like they didn't find us because we introduced Statamic to them. But that's regarding Statamic. And then for other work, I would say some of the work comes from my network, which helped me. Like before, I've done like a lot of NGO work in Chicago, in Philly, in Dallas too. So I've done a lot of NGO work with a lot of people, and that's like I built this network of people who trusted us on a lot of projects. I mean, I've even pitched Statamic to a Gov site, but we
Oh yeah.
lost because it was a paid option, and they specifically wanted something open source. But yeah, so that's another chunk of our work, and then I would say the others come like either word of mouth, like our clients referring us to their friends or other like vendors they work with, or sometimes it will be like because we also rank pretty well for Next.js agency, and we rank pretty well in the US for Laravel development agency, but only if you are near Dallas. Otherwise,
Okay. That's neat. That's different from, a couple episodes ago, I had Vin from Fixel, and he was kind of the opposite. They're having to introduce Statamic to a lot of their clients who probably have never heard of it. So that's kind of a neat flip.
I mentioned this a lot even to other agencies or like other community members in Statamic. I do mention this a lot, that we don't do a lot of reaching out for especially for Statamic, but we've also been lucky to even like when we've introduced Statamic to new clients, we haven't had any pushback, and I think that's mostly comes from because I think those organizations they reached out to us because they trusted us before that, so they kind of went with, okay, you guys are the expert, we kind of trust your decision, so we're going to leave this to you. And that was my experience. For example, when we worked on the My Body Tutor website, they had a pretty large WordPress website, and they were thinking of working. So they were thinking of switching the CMS, but they didn't land on Statamic. They were just like exploring for options, okay. And I didn't have a lot of explanations to do. Mostly it was I just introduced them to the features I think are best for Statamic, for them, like features from Statamic that would work best for them. And I think that kind of did the trick. They were struggling a lot with revisions, with like the custom post types on WordPress, performance issues, you name it. So they were also they on their old site they had an plugin for Stripe payments, which was pretty hectic, and they weren't like, they had to update it a lot. They had a lot of trouble with that. So when we reached out to them with a Statamic solution, we're like, okay, we can hook this up from Statamic. You will control the code. It's not going to change every day. It's going to be tailored to you. So ever since we've released that website, I don't think we've had any issue with that site. And they process a lot of payments every month, and it's all through a form that we've built, which they can kind of edit it out. Like they can add new plans, they can remove plans. So I would say, and I always say this, that we've had like very good experience of convincing organizations to use Statamic. I haven't had a lot of pushback, to be honest.
And coming out of those projects on the other side, what's their reaction once they've been using Statamic for a while, comparing it to what they've been on in the past?
I've yet to hear someone complain. I just had I think we had one case where someone said to us that this would have been better if we just used WordPress. And that's also, that's also an inherited project.
Yep.
The reason being, they kind of wanted, and this is something I'm very against, they wanted to kind of fine grain, I want to change the font size of this section. I want to change the background color. So you want to play designer. And I'm usually very against those because you run away from the constraints of the design. And the website becomes something that no one recognizes anymore. And we just refuse to work with those clients. We usually tell them we are not a good fit for this. You should find a WordPress agency that they're going to use a page builder for that. But that client, frankly enough, the comment came from someone like not involved with the website, but they just wished the website worked in that way. But the rest of the organization, they were pretty happy because they could make edits without worrying that we're going to break the website. And I think that was the win for them, because it allowed them to move quickly without breaking the website, which is something they had with their WordPress website.
Yeah, that's one of those tricky things with those kinds of page builder projects, especially in WordPress. Some people want that fine-grained control over every little thing, but now they have to exercise that control every time they make a new component. Like, I've got to add my own padding, I've got to add my own margins underneath paragraphs or whatever, and then it just gets out of hand. So, I mean, that was one of the reasons I started moving away from WordPress, because I found that process pretty tedious. And I mean, the whole block editor concept is pretty cool, but there's trade-offs where if you're managing all that stuff on your own, it can get pretty bogged down, and then you lose the thread that sort of connects the one component on the project to another.
But also, I'm not comfortable with a client having the opportunity to install plugins like out of the blue. We in the past we used to debug so many websites, or like they would ping us in the middle of the night, like, hey, the website crashed. And it will like 90% of the time, it would be they installed something that was not compatible. So we had to go in, remove it manually, refresh, and do all of that. So it's been very quiet quiet in a positive way, because we don't have those issues anymore. We don't have to worry about those. Like, you just build a site, they manage the content as it should be. If you need a new section, or if you need an update, like if you need the font something bigger or the background changed, we can see if that fits within the design, right? And frankly, the companies that we work with, especially our Statamic clients, they kind of understand that they're big enough to have their own design team, or they have a design, like an external design team, and they really respect those constraints. So they're like, okay, not everyone should have the ability to change the font size on this heading, right? It's very normal. So I'm kind of happy that we kind of landed on that type of client, right? Coming from, can I make this adjustment to the padding here? And then you wake up, the website is something you don't recognize.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely a huge risk there. You mentioned earlier, one of the things that drew you to Statamic was the idea of no databases. Do you find you just stick with the whole flat file format for your client projects, or do you need to incorporate databases eventually?
Okay, so if you follow, I'm not sure, but if you followed me on the Discord, I've experimented a lot, because we have some very, very large Statamic sites. For example, one of the sites that we have for Data World, they have I think they have more like 5,000 entries. It's still on flat files.
Wow. Okay.
And we just and also we've done rollbacks. So we also inherited the project. They were very early they moved to a database very early. The website eventually got big, but not that big. And the client was like, okay, this is not very flexible. I was sold this idea that, we could change stuff without breaking the site. But then once you go with a database, you kind of have to be careful with the blueprints. Right. So I was like, let's go back. And we just moved them back to flat files, and they're happy because, they still have that flexibility. We can play around with sections without trying to, to create migrations and all of that.
What was that process like?
So going back, I was surprised. My initial thought was I was going to ask, and I did ask on the partners channel. I asked hey, has anyone done a rollback? Did anyone go back? And it was that day that I found out there was a command to go back to flat files. So with a Lokman driver, you can also as you move into a database, you can also do the opposite. And then I found some bugs there, because I'm pretty sure we were the first ones that kind of tested out that command. And Ryan Mitchell, who's a very good developer, he kind of like, I'm pretty sure he resolved those PRs like that day that we reported them. So the rollback went pretty smoothly. And something that I kept in the database, and I'm still happy that we did, was the glide cache
Okay.
and the assets meta tags. Why? Because they have like, I think 10,000 assets on DigitalOcean bucket. So
Okay.
I think they're called DigitalOcean spaces. And it didn't make sense to bring that back to flat files. It's a lot.
That's a lot. Yeah.
So yeah, we kept that on the database, but we kind of switched it to an SQLite database. It was running previously on a MySQL database. So that was the only change. Like we moved it back to a SQLite database, and it works great now.
That's a great testament to the power of the flat file system, and how flexible Statamic is with database and being able to switch back and forth.
And
That's
also,
cool.
like since they did the performance optimizations on version 5, before that we did had a site that was struggling at 4K, I think, because it's not always about the number of entries, it's also what's inside. So we had like 4K pages with very complex blueprints, so it was kind of struggling. But after the performance overhaul on Statamic 5, I'm not even sure that you need to move to a database unless you go above 15,000, which is a lot.
Yeah, that is a lot. That's getting below, probably 95% of websites, don't ever reach that threshold unless it's a big like e-commerce site or something.
That's the reason I mentioned like I was always against databases, because we've never had like a website that big. I mean, unless, as you mentioned, unless you're in e-commerce, you don't really go above 5,000. I mean, even 5,000 is a lot, but let's say you have like a lot of historical blog posts, like years and years of publishing. That's the only thing that can get pretty huge, but again, manageable with Statamic.
Yeah, but even then, you're probably, depending on how often you're publishing, maybe you'll be in the hundreds or, low thousands, but
yeah. Never 15.
What's your tech stack like? Are you using the tall stack? What's the average Statamic site look like for you guys in terms of, the tools you guys are using?
So for Statamic, we try to use like the core, like the stuff. I would say like we try to stick to conventions as much as possible. And there is a reason behind this. One being a lot of the projects that we've inherited with Statamic, they were kind of built with some like agencies with their own conventions. So, view files, and, we would see like blocks based on view files and like a lot of complicated stuff for no reason. So one of the decisions that we made back then was like, okay, let's try to stick to conventions as much as possible. Even like if we lose a client, at least let's make it easier for other agencies, to continue with the work. So we've always used Tailwind and Alpine for small interactions. Even though we are, as I mentioned earlier, we are very invested in the JavaScript ecosystem, we've never went like full JavaScript on websites. We did that on our own website, but the only reason being it was already built with Next.js before we found Statamic. So it was a lot of work to rewrite all of that. And then for clients, if they're already on Statamic or if we're going to move them to Statamic, we never suggest like a front-end framework, because most of the time they don't need it. Like a good old Statamic site with Alpine, Tailwind CSS, Antlers, perfectly fine.
For sure.
As long as someone has like this complex requirement that you kind of, you need 3D or something very complicated, we might think of just doing that page, but most of the time we're going to stick to Statamic. And then for filters, like for example, if there is a requirement, we need like to do a filters page, for example, where you can sort or filter by a lot of tags or taxonomies or states. We usually reach out to Livewire just because it makes it very easy, and the code is just cleaner, it's easier to understand, and it's pretty good. You get the attributes for the loading state. You get all those things they're built in. And then
Yeah, that's pretty handy.
for styling, we use a lot of, there's an add-on called Statamic Components, or I think, no, it's called Antlers Components,
Okay.
which allows us to use Blade style components. They look like normal HTML tags, but they're custom components.
Okay.
The reason is because we come from a front-end background. We really like on front-end frameworks where you can, when you build components, they kind of have that HTML syntax.
Yeah.
So we love that. And we kind of have the same thing now with Antlers components. We pair that with Tailwind merge, which resolves Tailwind conflicts automatically for you. And you get this very customizable components that you can overwrite a single class if you wanted to. And
awesome.
that's I think it's a very good stack. Makes it very easy to work with. And as far as the Statamic goes, we have our own starter kit that we use. I think it's open source. We have our own starter kit, which is very bare bones. Mm-hmm. I really like minimal starting points, and then we add stuff as we go, and that one kind of just gives us the minimum that we need, and then we move forward.
So that one's not available on the marketplace. That's your own internal starter kit.
No, it's not available on the marketplace, but you can install it because it's open source.
Oh, awesome!
But we didn't list it because I didn't want to clutter the marketplace.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, I think we're drawing close to the end of our interview time here, but before we sign off, just a couple, super important questions about things that you like. Are you a dark mode or a light mode guy?
Dark mode.
Yeah. What is it about dark mode that you like?
Well, I think a long time ago, I used, because I a really, really long time ago, I used to work with C# and the Microsoft technologies. And they had this obnoxious light mode, which a lot of people are familiar on Visual Studio. And I hated it because when you work with that during the night, it's very painful. It causes eye strain. And as soon as dark modes got introduced in the development world, I jumped ship the first minute. But also, I'm a night owl, so I code a lot during the night, so it really helps, having a balanced screen.
Yeah, for sure. And you said you're mostly from a front end background, so I'm sure you have opinions on fonts. Do you have favorite go-tos if you're the one deciding, or ones that should be retired?
So I really hate. So I'm on a boat with a lot of designers where I think that we should retire Google fonts, because there's a lot of fonts that they're very great. Obviously they're free, they're good, but I think the web is getting cluttered and it kind of everything looks the same. So there's not a lot of new, fresh ideas. So lately I've been saying just please don't use especially the default ones like Poppins. There's Roboto, which I hate. Yeah, there's a bunch of these that they come as defaults, and a lot of websites use them. But I feel like they're very default and kind of loses the edge.
Yeah,
but overall, I'm not very I still don't have any fonts that I really, really hate, which is good.
Oh, okay. That's good. Okay. Are you a pizza guy? Do you like pineapple on pizza? Yes or no?
No, I don't like pineapple on pizza. Okay, I don't like the taste. Similar to a lot of people, but I'm not very vocal about it. I don't judge people who like it. I'm very okay with that.
So how can people find more information about Lucky Media or about you? Where would they go online to find you guys?
So I would say we rank pretty good on Google. We also lately we also get traffic from ChatGPT for
for some reason,
Oh,
and
wow, okay.
Perplexity. Yeah, they're referencing us for some questions. I haven't been able to see which pages, but I do see incoming traffic from those. But overall, like, I'm active on all social media accounts. Lately, not as much because of work, but yeah, I'm active everywhere. A lot of our content and what we do, our culture and everything is already available on our website. Yeah, that's about it. I don't have a personal website, sadly.
Okay. One of the few, I think, even if it's
Yeah,
neglected.
I've never liked the idea, so yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that's a wrap. Huge thanks to Lokman for being here on Talking Statamic. So if you enjoyed our conversation, please make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast player or on YouTube if you prefer to watch, and leave us a review or a comment. You can follow us on X at Talking Statamic, and we're on Blue Sky. And you can join the mailing list at talkingstatamic.com. And don't forget to check out my other YouTube channel, From WordPress to Statamic. And thanks for listening and watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Thanks.
Thanks.